Welcome to the regular meeting of Morganton City Council, December 3rd, 2018. This time I'll call on Mayor Pro Tem Forrest Fleming to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Join with me if you would, please. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you much. Be seated.
This time I'd like to introduce City Council. To my far right, Wendy Cato, City Council, Forrest Fleming, Mayor Pro Tem, Louis Vina, City Attorney. I'm Ronnie Thompson, your Mayor. Sally Sandy, our City Manager. Sydney Simmons, City Council. Chris Hawkins, City Council. Kelly Russell, our Recording Secretary. And Becky Brinkley is hidden in the corner for our deaf community. Okay, at this time I'd like to call on Reverend David Doster, Burke Community Bible Church, to deliver an invocation, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you this evening and to pray over what you folks will be deliberating on, the decisions you have to make. We've been going through the book of Daniel. I'm not going to read the entire book of Daniel for the sake of time, so take a breath. But I do want, as you consider your role of leadership here in our community, to share this one brief portion. And it says, "Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel answered and said, 'Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, to whom belong wisdom and might. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding.'" So with that in mind, let me pray for you folks and for the responsibility that you have and the weight that you carry. Heavenly Father, we come before your throne this night, grateful that we have access, even as we're mindful of this season, the great gift of your Son. Lord, we look to you knowing that you are sovereign over all, and even as we just considered, that your rulership extends over all. And so we ask, Lord, even for your sovereign grace here, for our community, for all the citizens that are here, not only in Morganton, but throughout Burke County as well. And we pray specifically, Lord, for those in leadership here, our mayor and all of our council members, Lord, that you would grant to them, even as we hear these words, wisdom. Give to them wisdom as they make decisions and deliberate over issues that confront our community, Lord. Guide and direct their steps. Grant to them a heart of humility as they seek to be public servants and to serve well and steward well the resources that you have blessed our community with. We are a blessed people, Lord, and have so much to be thankful for. We're mindful even this night, Lord, of a servant who served as our 41st president. We thank you for the dignity and the honor with which George H.W. Bush provided as our president. We pray for the Bush family this night and for your comfort of their hearts and lives. And we pray, Lord, as well for those in our community who find themselves in difficult straits, even this night, that you would extend grace and mercy to them. And Lord, above all, again, we are grateful that you, as a part of your wonderful plan, have given the most great gift of all, your Son, the Lord Jesus Christ, in whose name we pray. Amen. Thank you.
David, thanks so much. We have two retirement resolutions tonight. First resolution is honoring Kenny Fleming. I'd like to read that resolution. Whereas Kenny Fleming was employed by the City of Morganton as waste treatment plant operator 1 in the Public Utilities Department on August 28, 1989, reclassified as senior wastewater treatment plant operator in the wastewater department on July 1st, 2004, promoted to pre-treatment coordinator in the wastewater department on October 18th, 2004, changed to pre-treatment coordinator and backup ORC, which is an operator in responsible charge, on August 9, 2014. And whereas Kenny Fleming has faithfully served the City of Morganton in the wastewater department and has given of his time and efforts for the benefit of the citizens of Morganton for 30 years and 5 months, and whereas Kenny Fleming retired from the City of Morganton as pre-treatment coordinator and backup ORC of the wastewater department on December 1st, 2018, and whereas the Morganton City Council wishes to officially recognize the contributions of Kenny Fleming and express their appreciation for a job well done, Now therefore be it resolved by the City of Morganton that the mayor present this resolution to Kenny Fleming, adopted this third day of December 2018. Ronnie Thompson, Mayor, Sally Sandy, City Clerk. Do I have a motion to adopt this resolution?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Do I have any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. I'll ask Kenny to come forward, and I'll ask Sidney Simmons if he'll present that resolution.
Kenny, like the city, we appreciate your service. And I find out if you're 57 years old and retiring, gray hair does not qualify you. So you can come back to work anytime you like.
Thank you, Sidney.
And I'm easy on you, so you can share that with me if you want.
Kenny, would you like to say something, please?
I'd like to thank the city for giving me the opportunity way back in 1989 to come to work here and to serve the citizens of Morganton and protect the Catawba River. And that was always job one, with the dedicated professionals that I had the honor to work with over the last 30 years. And I know with the fine folks that we have here on staff and Brad's direction in the department, that Water Resources is ready for anything that comes our way in the future. Thank you all again.
Thank you, Kenny. We have another resolution honoring Ronnie Parker. I'd like to read that, please. Whereas Ronnie Parker was employed by the City of Morganton as Equipment Operator 1 in the Waste Treatment Department on March 23rd, 1989, promoted to Equipment Operator 2 on May 24th, 1990, promoted to Compost Operator on November 5th, 1992, reclassified as Senior Compost Operator in the Wastewater Department on July 1st, 2004, and whereas Ronnie E. Parker has faithfully served the City of Morganton in the Wastewater Department and has given of his time and efforts for the benefits of the citizens of Morganton for 30 years and 4 months, and whereas Ronnie Parker retired from the City of Morganton as Senior Compost Operator of Wastewater Department on December the 1st, 2018, and whereas the Morganton City Council wishes to officially recognize the contributions of Ronnie Parker and express their appreciation for a job well done, now therefore be it resolved by the City of Morganton that the mayor present this resolution to Ronnie Parker, adopted this third day of December 18. Ronnie Thompson, Mayor, Sally Sandy, City Clerk. Do I have a motion to accept this resolution?
So move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Ronnie is not able to be with us. That presentation will be made at a later date. Okay. Next is a service pen. Sally, would you cover the service pen, please?
Sure. So we have Leo Watson, who has spent the last 20 years with us, and you have to come up. I don't know where the pen is. Does somebody have this pen?
Wendy's.
Oh, Wendy's got
Wendy's
it.
gonna
Okay.
present it.
So Wendy's going to present that to you. So we have had the pleasure of working with Leo for the past 20 years. And I'm sure Leo has something to say.
No, no.
Please,
Please.
don't let me down.
I've already pinned him.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean anything, okay? But Leo, I can remember when he was first hired, and you started out under Dean, and so many different things, and now you are in charge of a lot of things that are important to this community, and I thank you for that.
Thank you. And thank all of you. As the electric department, working in the electric department, we just do everything that we can to try to make everything, provide power, keep it back on, get it back on as quick as possible for all the customers of the city of Morganton. So, thank you.
Thanks, Leo.
We thank you, Leo.
Thank you, Leo.
Okay, under public announcements and strategies, an announcement that the City Council and the Cable Commission will have a joint meeting on Tuesday, December the 11th, 5:30 in council chambers. Under upcoming events, at Comma, Lisa Rock in A Carpenter's Christmas on Thursday, December 13th at 7:30. The Messiah Sing-Along is Tuesday, December the 18th, 7:30 at the First Baptist Church. The New Year's Eve Masquerade is Monday, December 31st at 9 o'clock p.m. Downtown, we still have the Christmas Parade, which will be held tomorrow, December the 4th at 6 p.m. Carriage rides continue on Friday and Saturday evenings, and the holiday market is going to be Saturday, December the 8th, from 10 to 2 at North Green Street. At this time, I'd like to call on Chris Jernigan for an announcement, if he'll come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilman, Ms. Sandy, Ms. Russell. Thank you for allowing me just a couple of minutes to share about an exciting event. Established the Children's Advocacy Center of Burke County here in 1998. It was the 6th accredited Children's Advocacy Center in North Carolina and the first of many that we now operate. In case you're not familiar, the Children's Advocacy Center helps to coordinate the investigation and intervention of child abuse. So when a child alleges to have been abused, instead of law enforcement, DSS, the DA's office, those folks working in silos trying to get their investigations done, they come together as a team, as a multidisciplinary team. And we're able to do the interview and the medical exam at the Children's Advocacy Center on their behalf, working with them. They are there for the interview, it's recorded. We have been able to increase prosecution rates of perpetrators in our county since we began, and we've been able to provide a lot of services to children and families. We provide the mental health treatment there as well as victim advocacy. So we are very proud of what we're able to do to help children and families in the community. Very proud of our partnership with the chief and his staff here at the Morganton Public Safety, as well as the Sheriff's Department and DA and DSS. But I'm here just to invite you to, since it is our 20th anniversary, we're having an open house on the 13th of December, Thursday the 13th, from 12 to 2. Of course, that's at 408 South Green Street. And Ms. Russell has some little reminders for you. But we'd love to have you show up. It's just a drop in. There'll be some refreshments. But come by and see your Children's Advocacy Center, and we appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Next on our agenda is Ed Phillips, who has, I believe, a short presentation to make.
Short but important.
Very important, very important, and good news, I hope.
Great news. So Chad has a video. It's a 3-minute video, and Chad, if you would run that.
Hello, I'm Ed Phillips, CEO of the Burke County Tourism Development Authority, and I'd like to take a few minutes of your time to share with you some exciting, fantastic news about the tourism economy in Burke County. But first, did you know that Burke County has been a tourist destination since the late 1800s? When the Western North Carolina Railroad crossed into Burke County around 1880, this area was opened up for visitors to come enjoy the refreshing Mineral Springs hotels at Connolly Springs and Glen Alpine. The railroad brought them, and many stayed the entire summer. The Waldensians came from Italy in 1895, and they stayed forever. George Vanderbilt stopped in Burke County and searched for land to possibly construct his massive estate. But Burke was already a thriving place, and not enough land was available to suit him. As automobile travel became more reliable and the first U.S. highways were constructed, motor courts popped up and provided overnight accommodations for weary travelers. Then the interstate highways changed travel patterns again, and the Holiday Inn brand became synonymous with comfortable travel and swimming pools at each location. Interstate 40 became the lifeline for tourist travel into Western North Carolina, and Burke County was in a perfect location. Attractions and visitor resources became increasingly important. Here in Burke, we were blessed with a national forest, the Linville Gorge, and lakes and rivers for outdoor recreation. Campgrounds such as Steel Creek Park and Daniel Boone provided getaways with fun activities for all ages. Today, Burke County is a destination unto itself. There are art galleries, pottery studios, a fresco, 2 state parks, ziplining, wineries, breweries, and distilleries. State parks here saw nearly 1 million visitors in 2017. Hundreds of Burke County residents make their living inside of this tourism economy. These people are artists, destination retailers and restaurateurs, winemakers, brewmasters, distillers, and owners of bike shops, orchards, event venues, campgrounds, outfitters, and bed and breakfast and hotels. The annual party reaches millions of people each year and the economic impact on Burke County continues to reach monumental levels. And Burke County isn't done yet. A new hotel is under construction, and more hospitality development and growth is anticipated. According to the North Carolina Department of Commerce, in 2017, visitors spent $101 million in Burke County. This is the first time visitor spending has crossed that amazing amount of money.
So that's what visitors spent in Burke County in 2017.
Hello, I'm Ed
Total
Phillips.
retail sales in the same period was a little under $700 million. So what we've been able to discern is that 1 out of every 7 retail dollars spent in Burke County in 2017 was spent by a visitor. North Carolina sales tax collected from visitors to Burke County was nearly $7 million. Some of that tax money comes back to Burke County and helps pay for a long list of essential services that residents of Burke County benefit from. We've seen an increase in the numbers of visitors looking to move here. We simply don't have enough housing. You all know about the studies and how many housing units we need, and we need them now. Yesterday. Tourism is a significant part of the economy in Burke County and in Morganton. It is growing every year, and I believe we are just on the edge of a tremendous surge here that many residents will feel in a positive way. And I think there's at least one person here tonight who makes their living off of visitors that come here to the zip line. Mike Fishesher, and I appreciate you being here, Mike. And his zip line is a huge attraction in Burke County and in Morganton. There's probably others here as well, but more and more Burke County and Morganton residents are going to feel the impact of tourism, and I think you're going to see a lot of that next year or this weekend if you're out on Homers and downtown at the pop-up shop. So thank you. I'd entertain any questions.
Council, have any questions for Ed? Good news. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, next on our agenda is the North Carolina Municipal Power Agency. Any updates?
No updates at this time, but I do have one thing that I would like to say. I would like to express a thank you to the City Electric crews, of which Leo is a part, and to the Public Works Department, Public Safety, and the rest of the city employees, the IT folks that worked through the storm last weekend. It was a longer event than one that we are used to. It was, as I described in the paper, a perfect storm. I will tell all of you who didn't get a chance to see that, on Saturday, our Public Works crews cleared 5 dump truck loads of debris in order for the electric crews to be able to restore power. On Monday, they delivered another 68,000 pounds of debris to the landfill from the storm. So it was quite a mess. We'll also say that for those of you in the community who experience cell phone service interruptions or not working at all, there was a major fiber line that went down during the storm that belongs to another provider. And we all don't communicate anymore and have a copper line that runs from a pole to our phone. Everybody uses the same networks and the same communication networks. Compass was very fortunate in that we did not lose any fiber and we did not lose any of that. However, when your electricity doesn't work, neither does your internet and neither does your television. Also wanted to say, since we're expecting bad weather possibly again next weekend, it is always our policy that we will go to the hardest hit areas first, the areas where we feel like we have an opportunity to get more people's power restored quickly and work down that list. I will also say, never hesitate to call us, never hesitate to call us back, because as we are working, there are times that communication drops. This last storm was one of those because the phone system went down. But I want to say once again how much I appreciate the hard work. Within 24 hours, basically, we had everything restored. I know some of those around in our neighboring communities and neighboring counties were not as fortunate, and some of those outages lasted longer. But I wanted to say thank you for all the hard work.
Thank you. On our consent agenda, we have, I believe, 3 items. Could you cover those, please?
Absolutely. The 3 items are minutes from the November 5th council meeting, tax releases in the amount of $2,563.75, and a budget amendment to receive $3,850 from a grant to help pay for the Billy Goats Gruff Show and the Burke Honors Chorus, which occurred at Comma last month.
Does anybody on council wish to have any item removed? If not, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. It is approved. Thank you. Under new business, we have public hearings. We have 2 public. Public hearing is going to be the consideration of permanently closing a portion of a public alley extending northward from Concord Street between South Sterling and South Green Street. Okay. I'm going to ask our city attorney if he'll cover that for us before we open up the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I believe Chad, yeah, there we go. Okay, this is the unnamed alley that actually runs all the way from Concord Street north to another alley, the one that runs sort of behind where Wisteria used to be and connects. What you see is the map taken from the GIS of that block bounded by Sterling and Green and Concord. The part facing Concord, at the corner of Concord and Green, is the property of Catawba Brewing, and they have also now acquired the lots on the side, the Sterling Street side. So they're the owners of property on both sides of this alley. The alley's about 15 feet wide, according to the 16 feet actually, according to the plat and the tax maps. The city has not maintained that alley. If we ever did, it was many generations ago. This block was platted early in the 20th century, and the alley was reflected on the old maps. The city has never undertaken its maintenance, but it has been a public alley in the sense that it was open to the public. Catawba Brewing's owners, the Pyatts, the property owners, have requested the city to close off the portion of this alley from Concord to the back of their property, and which is what shows on the map. The rest of the alley would be unaffected. Because it was a public alley, even though we didn't maintain it, the city council would have to be the only people who could act to close it. It requires a public hearing, which has been noticed. If you should determine that it's in the public interest to close the alley and that no one would lose reasonable access to their property by closing it, then you may decide to close it, in which case the property owners on either side would become the owners of the alley, to the middle of the alley. And in this case, there's only one property owner because the Pyatts own on both sides.
Okay. We are now in a public hearing. Normally, we ask for people who support this hearing to speak first, and then those who don't support it to speak. So would anybody like to speak in favor of closing the alley? Would anyone like to speak concerning this issue? If you'll come forward. Your name and where you live, please.
Mike Fishesser from Jonas Ridge. We have a youth organization that uses the Play Again Therapy basement. It's called the American Adventure Service Corps. We've been there for 22 years with programs in Asheville and Morganton. We've served thousands of kids in Burke County over that time period. We would like to figure out a compromise situation so that we can get to our canoes and all the camping gear. Every Thursday, there's tons of parents and kids coming in the back door of the Play Again Therapy building, and we could access it through behind Martha McMurray's law office in Wisteria, but it's hard to get our big 25-passenger church bus back around those curves and get the canoe trailer out of the garages. So there's probably a neat compromise, but we'd love to explore that.
Thank you.
How do you get past the Catawba Valley stuff in the alley currently?
It's a challenge. when that big trailer's back there with that stinky stuff.
The gravel parking lot on the side of the building closer to downtown?
Yeah, where Buff Tire used to
On the
be.
other.
Yeah.
Okay, have you spoken with, I assume you're in this is the property that Ms. Lesh owns, right?
Yes.
Have you spoken to her about this?
Oh, yeah, she couldn't make it tonight. That's why I'm here.
And have you talked to the Pyatt's about that, understanding that they're gonna put a building on that gravel lot that you're talking about?
Monica has, I have not personally.
Okay.
Anyone else? Thank you for your comments. Anyone else like to speak for or against this issue? Public hearing is now closed. Louis, would you make some comment? Is there any, I don't know any way to do an
Well-
alternate design?
Well, the only thing that's before y'all is whether the alley should be closed.
That portion of the alley?
Right. You can always come in from the other end is unaffected by this, of course. The top, toward the top of the picture, the northwestern end. The standard you're supposed to look at to consider is whether any property owner would be denied reasonable access
To their property?
to their property. Whether any individual owning property in the vicinity would be deprived of reasonable means of ingress and egress.
Okay.
Now, I should say, you never have to grant the request. I mean, even if that wasn't the question, you could deny the request, but that's really the issue here, is do you feel that's being? And I note there are 4 other property owners, I believe, on that alley. Haven't heard from any of them.
Okay. City Council, do you have any questions for Louis? If not, what's the wish of council?
Motion to adopt an ordinance and order permanently closing a public alley extending northward from West Concord Street between South Green Street and South Sterling Street, and to vest title to the lands encompassed within said alley to the respective real property owners on either side of the alley.
We have a motion to have a second.
Second.
Any discussion?
May I just interrupt
Sure.
to say that the motion says to close the alley. It's obviously only to the extent that's shown on the map, and it was requested by the property owners, the
Okay.
Pines.
Any other questions? All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes. Okay, our second public hearing is to consider a petition to rezone approximately 3 acres on either side of Lyman Court from residential low conditional use to medium intensity district, which is MID. I'll call on Sally.
Okay, this property, in your agenda, it says 5 separate lots, but it's really 4. This property is 4 separate and adjoining vacant lots on either side of Lyman Court. Back in 2005, the property was granted a conditional use permit in our zoning ordinance and our zoning requirements at that time. And there has been a plan in place that could happen as per that conditional use permit since that time. Tonight, you have before you an opportunity to consider whether you're interested in rezoning this property once again, which would be to a medium-intensity district, an MID zoning. Philip Lookadoo is here tonight to talk a little bit of background about the property and the conditions regarding the property and how it starts out zoned and what would be considerations for anything tonight.
Philip, we'll call on you. I think some people would like to know the difference between residential, low conditional, and MID. So I'm not sure if that's part of your presentation, but we need to cover that if you could, please.
Okay. So, Mr. Mayor and members of council, as you are aware, this is what you see on the map here is the location of the property on West Union Street. Get my pointer. Okay. And this is the the current and or the current zoning. So you see it's currently conditional use, and then is proposed to go to MID. So conditional use, what that means is that there was, under the old zoning regime, there was a plan that was adopted. It was originally, it was zoned conditional use, and then there was a conditional use permit that was issued. This plan is the permit that was issued, and that is how that property can be developed currently today. There are, as you see, 14 lots, 14 units. And if the property was, build that under the current zoning ordinance, that was the permit, or the conditional use permit that was issued. And that would not change. If this rezoning application were not successful, those 14 units could be built as you see them on the screen now. So the difference is then, if he wants to, or if any successor in title wanted to change that plan in any substantive way, our current zoning ordinance says that if you want to change it in any, I think it either says substantive or material way, that you have to rezone it to a current zoning district. In order to obtain or to attain the density or the number of units on that property that is currently permitted, the only, the least appropriate, or the least dense appropriate zoning district is MID. You have LID, which is low intensity development, which has a base density of 2 units per acre and a max of 6 units per acre. You have MID, which is a base of 2 units per acre and a max of 10, and so on and so forth with HID. So that is the minimum request to get the number of units that you see here. What that does is, and the way that you get that, the way that you get from 2 to 10 is by attaining or obtaining performance points. And you can obtain performance points, in this case, for infill development or development of properties less than 2 acres. You can get it for decorative street lighting, sidewalks, and there's a list in the ordinance that allow you to do that. And if you accumulate units per acre and you get the 10 units per acre, and you can develop about the residential conditional use versus the MID?
It did. If Chad could go back to the drawing, or the picture showing the different, the color picture with the different colors, Chad, if you could pull that back up. Because it looks like part of the property is, the yellow is MID, correct?
No,
No,
the
none of
yellow
it
is
is
conditional use.
It's all
Conditional, okay.
use.
Oh, you mean the pale yellow?
Pale yellow.
That is
Oh,
MID.
pale-
That is
Yes.
MID.
Currently.
And it looks like in the picture, the lots on the right are in the MID district. Is that not correct? currently?
These 2 lots are in conditional use.
Okay.
This lot is in conditional use, and this lot is in conditional use. What you also see on top of that in the hatch pattern is
Right.
neighborhood conservation.
Right.
That neighborhood conservation does not come into play unless and until it is zoned MID or some other current zoning district.
Okay. Okay. We ready?
Okay.
Any questions for you?
Council have any questions for Philip?
Phil, Chad, can you go back to that, what you had previously, showing the 14, no, the other one?
This one?
The adopted plan.
The conditional
Adopted
use plan.
Okay.
There.
Is that,
Use, that is
Conditional
what
use.
can be built today.
what are we talking about? How many more are we talking about building?
Okay, so if it was successful in the rezoning, then that would allow up to 10 units per acre. Okay, and just doing the math, and I haven't just doing the math of the acreage versus the number of units per acre, that would allow up to 19 units on
Okay,
that,
in other words,
on that parcel, or
We're
those
good-
parcels.
We're good like it is for 14 units
Correct.
now. Okay, that's what I need to know. Thank
And there are different, as you know, there are different residential types. So there are And this, what is here is on lots 1 and 2 is a duplex, and then the rest, the remainder are single family. Under MID, you could propose something along the lines of a townhome, condominiums, apartments, those types of things, and to get your density to where it would be.
Any other questions for Philip?
Philip, I have one. Is there anything that MID will allow that the LID will not, that's non-housing related?
There are a number of uses that are allowed in MID that are not allowed in LID. A number of those are commercial in nature. They run the gamut. Our ordinance is broken up into different sectors. You have, I think it's retail, you have civic and institutional, you have service. There are any number of uses. What you will also see, and if I can get to, let me get to this next slide. So if you, this is a clip of our permitted uses table. So if you want to pick one on here, let's say, just say retail uses. And we have a classification of retail uses less than 3,000 square feet inside a fully conditioned or a fully enclosed building. So that is not permitted in the NCO. So we have these overlay exceptions. It is permitted in MID, but it is also subject to section 3.4.5A. And I have put another clip in here of 3.4.5A. Okay? So there are 3 provisions in there that, or conditions rather, that if you wanted to establish a retail use, and I would tell you that if we get the ordinance and go through the ordinance, that any of those non-residential uses have these same conditions on them. Now, they vary just a little bit. In the retail sector, it's more intense, and I'll explain that in just a moment. But if you look at number 1, it says that all such uses within the MID district shall have a minimum lot size of 20,000 square feet. Okay, so that's the minimum lot size you can have for a non-residential use. The second sentence talks about that you have a 50-foot setback for any non-residential use from the neighborhood conservation overlay. So, and I have a map that I can show you that shows you what that 50-foot setback is. So if you look at your setbacks in the zoning ordinance, you typically have in MID, you'll have a 20-foot front setback, a 10-foot side setback, and a 20-foot rear setback. What this does is increases one of those setbacks, depending on which lot, to be commensurate with that 50-foot setback from the neighborhood conservation. Number 2 says that such uses shall only take their access directly from streets that meet commercial street standards as set forth in the City of Morganton engineering standards and specifications. Okay, so that sets out a minimum, but the second, which is a 60-foot wide street, but the second sentence in there says that uses indicated in the table below shall only take their access from streets classified as arterials shown on the Morganton Thoroughfare classification map. So a road, an access would have to be built into that property, and it would have to access onto to West Union Street. So whether whatever that use would be that's non-residential would have to have access directly onto West Union Street. So that's the second thing, and then the third talks about that they have to meet the performance standards and the design standards that are set forth in the MID district. So yes, with conditions.
Can we look at that map?
Yes, I'm sorry. So in this map, this red, so this is one of the properties in question, which is a combination of this blue and the yellow. I'm outlining it now. Okay, so the setback would extend here. Obviously, this parcel wouldn't be included. These are the properties that are the subject properties. You would extend over to here, and then it would get this property here. So, and what we did is we did a little calculation of the acreage that would be remaining after you remove the setback. so that it would be buildable area. Now, you still have to add in your other side and front and rear setbacks, but that is, on the west side of the street of Lyman Court, it is 4.14 acres, and on the east side would be 0.70 acres. And so, and what we did is this blue represents essentially what you call a flag lot, and it would be how you would get your access onto West Union Street. Now, what we did is, the definition of lot width says that you measure it, it's the lot width at the building setback. And so we just measured that minimum lot width is 80 feet, so we just dissed Union Street. The other thing that, if I may offer information, there was a question at planning and zoning was, what did NCDOT say about accessing the property, particularly in the case of the residential density that was there? We contacted NCDOT, and NCDOT essentially, so if you see these, I think they're pink lines or light red lines here, they essentially said that you would need to restripe where this is a taper from the island that's coming out of town. You would restripe that to a turn lane, and that would provide enough flow and of traffic into and out of that property.
Any other questions?
Yes, I'd like to make a comment on this, if I might. I'm pretty much familiar. I did the on-ground walk on this property. And it is without a doubt that West Union Street is, everything west of this property on West Union Street is residential property. Now, if we choose to approve this to MID, then I do realize that it may be unlikely that this could be developed into commercial property. But on the other hand, it could be developed into commercial property because with MID classification, it could be done. Might be costly, but it could be done. Now, my concern is, since this is all residential area, I don't know whether I'm going to be in favor of taking that chance that down the road sometime, since we have no guarantee that housing or apartments might be built there, and this construction might begin within the next year or so, or shorter time than that, and also taking in consideration that this property has been available for construction by the current owner for the past 12 or 13 years, and nothing's been built there.
Forrest, let's go ahead and open the public hearing, if we could, please. Okay. I'll call the public hearing open. We'll ask for, I think Louis, would you like to?
Very briefly,
Yes.
if I may, conducting the public hearing, I believe we're going to ask that proponents of the rezoning speak first, then those opposed to the rezoning. That will just keep it in a little better order. We ask that try to limit yourselves, because there's probably a lot of people who wish to speak, a bit in time, and specifically, please avoid repeating the same arguments that have been. So ask people to remember, when you come to the lectern, address your comments to the council as a whole rather than to any individuals or other people in the audience.
Public? Yes.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. And when you come forward, please state your name and address first.
So at this time, we'd ask for someone who's in support of the project to please come forward.
Hi, my name is William Andrews. I live at 4721 Northwest 27th Avenue, Boca Raton, Florida. I'm the owner, and for the last many years, we always viewed this as a residential project, and we almost got it started until the bids came out and for the first project, and the problem there was that they went way over what the marketplace would hold. And so I sat on the project, and fortunately I did, because then we got that famous recession that came along. And so I continued to hold it. And then about 2 years, maybe it was less than 2 years ago, my sister, who lives up here, and that's how I found Morganton, she said that there was an article in the paper about a need for housing in Burke County and Morganton and what have you, and that there was going to be this real need for housing. And I thought, okay, let's go out and explore that and see if now is the time and what exactly could be built on these properties that would serve the needs of the community and complete the project. So I started working on that, and interestingly enough, many people in the community came up with the same formats. They had a certain price range that they felt the community would need. They felt for family housing, so much square footage, for retirement housing, so much square footage and everything like that. And that seemed to fit into the property shape and what have you. But in no way, we were still, the original units that we designed were coming in at $375,000. And the market, as I did some research, wouldn't sustain that at all. However, the next big problem was that a lot of your contractors have moved. And this isn't something unique to Morganton. I can tell you there are communities all over the United States, small communities, where the construction companies have moved out, moved to other places, and that's typical after a recession. So I explored modular housing because I am somewhat familiar with it. And a company out of Pennsylvania, I went up and saw the manufacturer and what have you, and they could perform the build, and they could put those buildings on the site, and a local contractor would be responsible. And I have one lined up out of Rutherton, the city of Rutherton, that I'll be meeting with tomorrow, along with the members of a member representing the manufacturing company, to put the same number of units, 14 units, that I originally was granted under the CU. The interesting thing is that you've now adopted this performance point system. And the first round of doing some drawings in there gave me quite a headache, and I can assure you it's something that you really have to dig into to come up with something that meets your requirements and yet fits this property. As you know, on the east side of Lyman Court, that property takes a tremendous dip on one side, and to build on that property takes some unique configurations and what have you. But we've come up with the architect and I have come up with a solution. And so we're pretty much ready for final numbers to be drawn up to start the project. The nice thing about the modular housing, this particular type of housing is very high-end. To those that don't know about it, for instance, the wind loads, not a big thing unless you're in a hurricane district, but this particular company, their wind load on these buildings is 150 miles per hour. That includes the windows and the doors and everything else. There's a third more lumber in a manufactured home than there is in a stick-built home. And the nice thing also is that if we started tomorrow, assuming we had the land cleared and tamped down in its proper form, we could theoretically have, at that point, and getting permits and everything, we could theoretically have housing up and ready for occupancy in 6 to 8 weeks. And that's because majority of it's done. And it's, like I said, I went to the manufacturing facility. I've been in architecture and design all my life. And I can tell you that my next house will definitely be a modular house because they're phenomenally well built. We have plans for sidewalks. You have a point system. We have plans for sidewalks on both sides. We have plans for street lighting. We have plans for, we're from a lady that wanted a park as part of the project. And lo and behold, we have a design where in the back there's a private park. And your point system, your performance point system, gives a point for 20% coverage, open space coverage. We just calculated that we have close to 50% open space on these properties. 50%. That's a long way to get to that point. And actually what it is, there's a picnic area in the back, there's an open area for kids to play soccer and do that sort of thing. So it's really a community type of housing project where families with kids can move in there with the certain units that we have, and also retirees who, as I like to say, if my wife were living in one of these large mansions, she'd say, I'm tired of dusting that whole thing, and I want to downsize.
Mr. Andrews, I hate to interrupt you, but I really think in the interest of everyone's time, could you please focus on why you want to rezone this property to MID and not get into any of these other matters that aren't really before us tonight?
Why I wanted to zone it to MID?
That is the issue that's before the council.
Well, in order to, what happened was, in the old plan, the street on the east side, there was a cul-de-sac built, okay? And the homes were built facing north and south, okay? That, in essence, made that part of the project totally undoable. And all I wanted to do was turn them east and west. And so what I did do was, I designed a project, I designed this project for that, but that didn't meet your minimum lot widths, so I turned it into a condominium, 8-unit condominium there. And then on the other side of the street, there would be, instead of 7 individual homes, there would be 6. The front is a single-family lot that would be for somebody to come in and build their own special home that would be the kind that you would find going up and down West Union Street, especially going west. In other words, a very high-end lot, home design there. And then the backside, the next 5 lots, would be 2,000 square foot architecturally designed homes. And by the way, in your point system, again, it requires certain things to be done that these homes aren't your basic home. They've got architectural detailing and all sorts of things going on there that it speaks to upgraded housing.
Okay. Well, we're going to have to, yeah.
I think
Thank-
anybody have any questions for him?
Any questions for Mr. Andrew while he's at the, okay. Thank you so much. We'll ask for anyone else to come forward for support of the project. Anyone else like to speak now about the project? I guess not in support of the project.
And I live at 103 Terrace Place. I'm here tonight to ask you to deny Mr. Andrews' rezoning request. The properties were originally purchased 14 years ago in 2004, and he developed a plan to put in additional housing on West Union and Lyman Court at that time. He never broke ground on any of the properties. At the time of purchase and over the next couple of years, he worked with the city to get conditional use zoning district on that property. That was accomplished in 2005 for 14 units. Conditional use was attached so that a property could be developed with special conditions that ensured the intent of the zoning ordinance was realized, And the intent was to keep it residential, 14 units, and to keep it like the rest of that street and the rest of the area. By attaching the conditional use, the city allowed for some leeway for him to be able to develop what he needed to develop, but also to protect the adjacent properties. The current zoning ordinance does not provide for conditional use. If you approve MID zoning for those parcels, then they could be developed commercially. That may be something that he does or something that a future owner does. At the Planning and Zoning meeting in August, changing the zoning at that time would have actually allowed for a pawn shop on some of these properties. Now, I understand that those would have had to have been accessed by what is currently the Burke Charitable Properties, BUCM, but that is a possibility in future, that would be available. Your Planning and Zoning Commission voted this down and denied his request with a vote of 4-2. I really hope that you will put some weight into the decision that they made. They took the time to go through and understand everything that was being brought before them. And I think that you should honor their denial. Changing the zoning to MID is really opening a can of worms. There is nothing to protect those parcels if he does not build on them now. And it's my belief that he's not going to build on them. He's had 14 years to start building, and he hasn't. He's got really lovely plans, and they are nice plans, and he's talked about them many times and gotten into the beautiful park and the green space and what they're going to be made out of and all of these things. But we're here tonight to only approve the zoning change. None of the other things that he has said matters. He can talk all he wants about the beautiful brick homes or vinyl-sided homes or expensive garage doors and all of these things that he's going to put on there. But you all can't consider any of that. You can only consider the zoning. Once the zoning is changed, if you were to approve it, he or a future owner can do what they wish as long as it falls under that zoning ordinance. I also would like to point out that the zoning ordinance was not on the website, the city website. It was requested by me as well as other members of the community last Tuesday and was not provided until 9:30 this morning. We also believe that the sign was placed on Monday of last week, which I don't believe meets your requirement. At this time, I don't want to take up any more of your time, so I'd like to ask for anybody else in the audience that is in favor of a no vote to please stand.
Thank you, Leanne.
Thank you for your time.
Anyone else like to speak, for or against?
Hi, I'm Dr. Matthew Robinson. I live at 101 Terrace Place, and I just have some questions. I'd like to know if we've done any studies on what the traffic flow on West Union is, and subsequently what the traffic flow is on the side streets. I live on Terrace Place, and I can tell you as a point of fact, as a homeowner with small children, that there is a tremendous amount of traffic flow on Terrace Place with people who do not own homes on that street because they're avoiding the red light at the intersection. And I know that on the other streets, there is a tremendous amount of traffic flow that is happening at high rates of speed because they're not monitored by the police, and they're avoiding red lights as it is. And things of that sort that slow down traffic, generally speaking. I'm adamantly opposed to this, but I think that before we move through this and we just say, well, based on the number of people, there should be this amount of traffic flow. I think we need real numbers as to establish what the traffic flow is, and if we put in modular homes that are going to increase without a doubt traffic flow, what is the actual number that we're dealing with that we have now, and what will it be if we add potentially modular homes that are not necessarily single-family buildings, but buildings that could go from, I'm sorry if I misunderstand, what currently the maximum number of people who could live on this property with its current zoning is, sir?
Number of units?
No, number of people.
We
We
don't,
don't have the-
that's not subject to zoning. You can't determine.
But, I mean, he can only put so many units in there, and so many people can live in so many units.
14 units.
Right,
current.
so with the proposed changes, the units would increase to,
Probably would decrease, wouldn't it, Philip?
Well, he could get, he could get up to 19 units total.
so 19 units increases it significantly, and if it, potentially, we could have retail stores, pawn shops, and whatever in there. What is our traffic flow? Exclusively a one-way, because West Union is coming together at a Y, right at Terrace Place where I live. And there's a lot of traffic flow there that is being funneled off of West Union because people are going in different directions and avoiding stoplights. So I appreciate your time and I appreciate your consideration. This council has already decided once to deny this, and I would appreciate it if you could continue with your previous opinion.
Philip?
If I may address just real briefly the traffic counts, the North Carolina Department of Transportation publishes every 2 years the average daily traffic counts. When we presented this in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission, we had the benefit of the 2016 counts, which actually would have occurred in 2015, just by the way DOT processes those counts. The count was 9,300 cars per day.
On West Union?
On West Union Street, that is correct. Today, we pulled up, I was at a meeting last week, and it was made known to us that the new traffic counts were out, so we pulled up the traffic counts. That traffic count at that same spot is now 9,200 vehicles per day. I'm not sure what DOT is using for their trip generation model. Typically, for residential property, it's somewhere around 10 trips per day per unit, so that would add around 200 vehicles per day, so it would put them back up to about 9,400 vehicles per day, depending on which way they traveled once they left Lima Court.
Thank you, Philip. Anyone else like to speak before we close public hearing? Yes.
Hello. Jana Kropelnicki, 107 Terrace Place. I think I have a question, and I don't know if it's Mr. Lukadu can answer it or not. I wasn't sure if the MID was required in order to be able to put modular homes, if that was part of the reason for the rezoning?
No, ma'am. The reason for the rezoning was because of the change in the design of the development. And so that required it to be rezoned from the conditional use to some other current zoning district. The rezoning, the MID really addresses the number of units that are available to be built per acre. So really, housing type, the different type, whether it's stick-built, whether it's modular, is all allowed. As long as it meets the North Carolina State Building Code, then we don't regulate that.
Thank you. Okay, so that kind of brings me back to, I guess, my concern, which is, I think for a difference between 14 housing units or units that are allowed now versus 19, I just don't think that's a significant difference. To take the chance that somebody, be it this nice gentleman or somebody else down the road, makes this into some sort of retail or does some sort of road where the BUCM building is, to create an in-way into allowing that to be some other kind of space other than residential. I get we need housing. I totally get it. I just don't think the risk is worth it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Cab?
Ken Bonfield. I live at 315 West Union. It's an interesting situation as I see it, because I certainly understand as a builder and as a developer to the way that the houses were going to be configured, and I know that piece of property very well as it goes down to the mission station. And in order to have built according to the plan that was voted for on conditional use, you would have had to build a gigantic retaining wall, filled it in, to have all of those houses on the same level, facing each other on a cul-de-sac. And then there were, of course, all the discussions about getting fire trucks in there and police and services, and it was an impossible situation from a services standpoint as well as anatomically. So I understand, and please, someone correct me if I'm wrong, that obviously to get a better configuration of properties on the east side, to have them all facing Lyman Court, and you're talking about connected properties, I believe. You're talking about townhomes or condos that are all connected there, you're talking about putting 8 properties there, obviously that makes more sense. But because of the change in the city zoning, conditional use doesn't exist anymore, and therefore, the reason that we're going for MID is because it's the only next best thing that is allowing for this density, because we're changing the configuration from what was conditional use. So I don't know if this is possible, and I can't be the first person who's thinking about this, but if the zoning were left unchanged, okay, where it remained residential just with this conditional use, those specifications, and some kind of a conditional use could come up for the reconfiguration of everything on the east side of the street, while you're changing nothing on the west side of the street, then you would still have the lot in the front for private development. You would have, now, Mr. Andrews, I think you said 5, but it should be 6 on that side, because you're talking about 8 and 6. 5, because of the front house would be the 6th. Okay, so you're talking about 8 on the east side, 5 behind the sold-off front lot. Correct. So if there was some way that the city could strike some kind of a deal where they could get approval for the reconfiguration of the houses all facing the street on the east side, okay, change nothing of the configuration behind the west side, that would allow the conservation of the low density being in the front, and would not allow for MID to ever go through on this property. And that's the problem. When the zoning types were changed, nothing was created to fit into this category. And the next category that came available allowed retail. Because LID does not, correct? To my knowledge, LID does not, but LID does not meet his numbers. And the west side of the property does meet his requirements, but the east side of the property does not. So if the city could somehow come up with a way to simply change the configuration of the houses on the east side, you would have 8 there, all connected, all facing the street. All of the others, the other 5 would be 2,000 square foot apiece on the west side. The front lot would still remain private for one home, based on the city's conservation law of what can be built on West Union Street, if I'm correct. And you wouldn't have to go into MID to approve the risk of commercial use. So the problem here lies in the fact that when this was approved, I lived there when this was approved, when this was conditional, it was conditional. So it seems to me that a compromise would be to create some kind of a conditional use for this project that would have to be approved by the board, would have to be approved by the city, but would not require that we go into MID.
If I may just address that very briefly, the problem is our current ordinance does not allow for conditional uses, conditional use permits.
Exactly, and it
Therefore,
did and it doesn't, correct.
Which is a change that we made in 2015. And
Right.
You know.
Right, and no disrespect.
Unless you change that again.
Yes, sir, and so no disrespect, but therein lies the problem. Therein lies the problem. We did not allow something like this to occur to keep look, I love where I live. I moved there for a reason. I love that street, okay? Morganton has a few showcase streets. That's one of them. That's one of them. You want to do anything you can possibly do to leave it that way, but you don't know what's going to happen with Mr. Andrews. No disrespect. I like Mr. Andrews. No disrespect, but you don't know what's going to happen with his plan, okay? And you don't know what's going to happen with another developer 20 years, 15 years down the line who knocks a few things down, buys them out, and say, I'm putting something commercial here. So in my own interest, it's very fearful that the city opens itself up for commercial development in a neighborhood that extends in either direction as residential, okay? There are several houses on either side of that street that are residential. And the threat of something commercial there is to me, is heinous. And if our only designation is a designation that potentially allows for commercial development, I don't know how the city can vote for that. Although at the same time, I hate to see a good plan go to waste, because to me, if something could happen just to change the configuration on the east side of the street, you'd have a good solution. And I respect the fact that that designation doesn't currently exist.
Thank you
you very much.
Anyone else like to speak?
My name's Stan Hendricks, and I live at 108 Lyman Court. We own 105 and 108, the My family has owned property on that street for over 80 years. We've seen the street come from a dirt path to a gravel road to a little paved one-way street. At one time, we owned 4 properties on that street. We were allowed the opportunity to sell Mr. Andrews 2 of the properties, and did that naturally for a profit, but also for improvement, a better street, better emergency care, better facilities. We have an opportunity for improvement on Lyman Court. There seems to be some legalities that's standing in the way. We have some afraid of commercial development, and I agree with them. I don't need that on my street. Are there any way to exempt the front lot from the new request?
May I address that? Because I think several people are hinting at this.
Just the front lot?
The
In other
front
words-
lot, excuse me.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, and you can see on the one map, maybe Chad can bring it back up, that shows the property proposed to be rezoned. The front lot, even though the request is, that's the one, is to rezone all of it MID. The front lot, as you can see, has that cross-hatching to indicate it is within already the neighborhood conservation overlay. If the properties, if all 4 properties are rezoned MID, then that front lot would be MID, but it would be within the neighborhood conservation overlay. And if we go back to that table of uses that Philip was referring to, you will see that even though there are dozens of uses, including commercial uses and office uses that are allowed in MID, that aren't allowed in other zones, none of those are allowed in the neighborhood conservation overlay. So that portion, which is about half of the total of Mr. Andrews' property, for all practical purposes, the only use that can be made of that lot is residential, and within a limit, certain limits even then. Philip, am I right that now that we corrected that little problem with the pawn shop, that there's virtually no use, commercial or office use, that could be made in the neighborhood conservation?
That's correct.
Yeah. That's what I thought.
And it goes even further to say that 2-family dwellings are not allowed in the NCO.
Yep.
Neither are multifamily dwellings or manufactured homes.
Right.
So the modulars would, because they meet state building code.
Right.
But, and then the other thing that is not allowed is boarding houses and rooming houses.
Right.
So that it even further restricts what's allowed within the residential.
In other words, it would be more restrictive than under the current conditional use.
And that's for that front property.
Right, just for that part. The
Just
other
the-
3 lots are not in that NCO.
So back to my point of, if we eliminate that fear of a pawn shop being built on the front lot, it would be ridiculous for anybody to even consider trying to build commercial on down the street.
Correct.
So, and I'd like to address the traffic problem. I mean, all we need is a red light if it gets that bad. So that's not a big issue, in my opinion. I mean, we're building a hotel in the middle of town. Traffic's not a big issue. I do appreciate their concerns, my neighbors' concerns, but it's time to develop that area. I've known Mr. Andrews since the beginning. We talk often, he calls me, he keeps me in the loop, runs things by me, has asked me to be very involved into this development. My building experience of about 45 years warrants that I can help him, steer this. No, I have no guarantees that something commercial can't be built in here if you rezone it, but I just don't think that's what happened. I think his goal is to help beautify Morganton, produce some housing, try to make a little profit, and improve Lyman Court. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'm sorry, again, I'm Dr. Matt Robinson, I live at 101 Terrace Place. The follow-up is, while this one parcel of the property is currently, because of the rules and regulations that are in place, make it not amenable to commercial use, there is a very large structure that is currently not necessarily on the market, but could potentially become on the market, and that whole area would open up as a commercial piece of property. If it did come on the market, at some point, somebody could develop all of that. The Burke County, what's the name of that facility?
Charitable properties.
Charitable projects. Therein lies the rub, and, you know, is a major issue. With enough money thrown at that entire area could become a commercial area. I am not from Morganton, but I have been here for 3 years and am in the process of re-signing my contract with the hospital to be here for another 5 years. I'm a member of this community and have no intention of leaving. I'm excited to see the good things that are happening for Morganton. I agree that housing is a necessary thing. When I came to this community, finding a house that was appropriate and affordable for my family, that was a reasonable price point, was impossible. My real estate agent, she was beside herself because she had showed me 60 properties that were, you know, either just not imaginable or extremely overpriced, and then would require another $250,000. And so I would have an $800,000 home before moving forward. The point is, yes, housing is important and we do need it. Yes, some sort of project in there would be a good thing. A commercial opportunity there is not a good thing. There are plenty of buildings in Morganton that are currently not being used to their full potential, that could be redone, reimagined, and something positive could come of it and make Morganton better.
Okay.
A commercial piece of property at this location is not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Ken Bonfield. Just one more question. In the event that this were zoned MID and building occurred and everything was residential, down the line, if somebody decided to buy up several properties, get rid of them, and try to put in something commercial, how difficult is it for the city to get something rezoned back to LID or to residential low?
You'd have the same process we're going through here.
Same process. In other words, someone can come and say, hey, I want to develop something for $3 million. This is MID. It's been MID since 2018, and I'd like to build on it. And then again, you'd have these kind of meetings. So again, it is changeable in the same process.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Andrews, before you come back up, I'm going to ask anybody else, I'm going to give you a chance to sort of wrap it up. Anyone else like to speak? Mr. Andrews?
Thank you. One of the things that I made a calculation today, if we do this project with the 14 units, you're going to have $4 million worth of housing on your tax rolls. You're going to have 14 families that are going to be able to shop downtown and enjoy your community and take a small part in adding to the your housing needs. It's a small part, but I guarantee you it's and by the way, I've already invested close to $10,000 in architectural fees and drawings and trips to the manufacturer, et cetera, et cetera. I wouldn't have put that out there if I thought I was going to stick a for sale sign on that property. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Public hearing is now closed. We need to take a motion first before we have discussion. To have a motion.
Motion to approve or to deny the rezoning of 5.
Has to be one or the other.
Oh, excuse me. I'm just reading. Motion to approve the rezoning of 4 tracts of real property on Lyman Court owned by William Andrews from residential high conditional use to medium intensity district MID.
Okay, we have a motion. To have a second. No second? Okay, it's denied.
Well, no.
Is that correct?
no,
Help me,
The
lawyer.
motion fails.
Motion fails.
Still have to have a motion.
Do you have another motion?
I move to deny the rezoning request of 5 tracts of real property on Lyman Court owned by William Andrews from residential high conditional use to medium intensity district, MID.
Motion and second. Any further discussion?
Ronnie, I just wanted to say that from the beginning, I was very concerned about this, and I've spent many hours with Philip in his office, and I appreciate all my constituents that have called and talked to me about this. I also serve on the Housing Board, and I know the great need for housing in this community. I feel that with the expense of somebody coming in and using the back lots as a commercial use, there is a risk factor, but that risk factor was much lower than I first anticipated, and that's why I voted the way I did.
Okay. Any further discussion? The motion on the floor is to deny the rezoning for Mr. Andrews. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion to deny that application, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed. That vote's 4-1. Thanks, everyone, for being here and being a part of the process. Next on our agenda is consideration of a resolution supporting the plan of BDI to convey part of the Burke Business Park property for consideration of speculative building. Sally?
Yes. So BDI has requested
I'm
that
sorry.
you
I know you
consider.
guys have a process, and I apologize. I just wanted to, Leo was honored for his 20 years of service. He was on my street at 10 o'clock at night, taking care of my electrical outage, and I just wanted to thank Leo. And I apologize for interrupting your process. Thank you,
It's
Leo.
okay.
Go Leo.
Thank you.
Sally?
BDI has asked that the county and the municipalities who have come together to help originally purchase the Burke Business Park to consent and allow them to negotiate with a developer who is interested in putting a spec building on that property. There is really no requirement that we have to approve that, but it has always been the mode of operation that anything that happens out there, the original partners have been involved in approving that. The requirement would be if BDI is successful in negotiating the terms, that the project would have to be under construction within 12 months, that the taxes, and those are county taxes only, and I believe they have held their public hearing and approved already, okay, forgiving those taxes while this is owned by the developer that would have the spec building. And then anything else that would happen on that property after that, incentive-wise, if someone took the spec building, would be a different issue altogether. We'll tell you that BDI has been working to seek grant funding in order to do some of the infrastructure improvements out there, which include some water improvements, which include a water tank.
What's the wish of council?
Motion to adopt a resolution endorsing the plan of BDI to convey a portion of Burke Business Park property to a developer in consideration of developer's promise to construct speculative building on that property.
I have a motion to have a second.
Second.
Any discussion?
May I add one thing to what
You may.
Sally said? The tract that they're talking about conveying for the spec building is, I believe, less than 10 acre.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Next on our agenda is consideration of approval of a master services agreement with engineering consulting firms to perform on-call engineering services for the city of Morganton. I'll call on Philip Luckadoo to give us some information.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, while from time to time we have need for engineering services that fall generally outside the scope of what the city engineer would have the credentials to undertake, i.e. if it's a civil engineer and we have the need for a structural engineer or geotechnical engineer, that type of thing. we need the ability to be able to maintain our level of responsiveness and bring someone on board to conduct those services. That was brought forward rather quickly at our city engineer leaving our employment and going elsewhere. And so we then had a need for those same services that the city engineer provides. And so we looked around at other models of how other municipalities handle that. And one of the ways that they handle that is through what's called an on-call services agreement, and that's handled through a master services agreement. And that's where we would have 3 firms that would be on call, that would be able to provide that level of service to us. Immediately would be for civil engineering services in the short term. In the long term, once we get that position filled, then we would need those types of services that are outside the scope of what our city engineer would typically do. So what we sent out a request for qualifications. We received some responses from 12 firms. We ranked and scored those and brought in 4 of those firms to interview. And then we also ranked them again based on the interviews. And we have recommended 3 firms that we would use for on-call services. The way that would work is, again, through that master services agreement. And the range of the 3 firms, the hourly rate ranged anywhere from, I believe it was $18 per hour to $116 per hour, depending on the type of person that was, whether it was a technical person or a drafts person or whatever, or a professional engineer working on a project. That would be governed by the amount of money that is in the budget for engineering services. So regardless of, whatever we contracted for, what would happen is we would have a need, we would contact one of the firms, we would draft up a scope and negotiate the price, and then issue them a work order, in a sense, to conduct that work.
Thank you, Philip. Okay, do we have a motion?
Motion to authorize the mayor and city manager to execute master services agreements with AECOM, Gannett Fleming, and West Consultants for on-call engineering services on behalf of the city, and the additional authority to make such alterations, technical amendments, and changes as may be necessary to implement each of the agreements.
I have a motion to have a second.
Second.
Any discussion? Obviously, Philip, we need engineering services.
Yes, sir.
To continue our growth and progress. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next on our agenda is the consideration of a sidewalk encroachment at 301 North Sterling Street. Sally?
Yes, this is a result of some of that growth and some of that change that is happening in downtown. And I think Chad's going to pull up a picture for you all. So there is a project going on at 301 North Sterling Street. And today, when you look at that, if you were in the street, you would see several electric poles that sit around that curved part of that building. The project going on is looking to have a deck, as you see, coming out of the front of that building and a structure supporting that, requiring us to consider a sidewalk encroachment. And I believe Chad also has a picture that we've done, which is our engineering drawing, we're going to call that, if you'll bring that up too, Chad. Keith Whitaker is doing business as 301 North LLC, is requesting this, and this is kind of the design of how this would go and how the corner would get changed. We have a history of doing this. Obviously, when you do an encroachment, there's always attention paid to handicap accessibility and still maneuverability around that portion of the sidewalk.
What's the wish of council?
I move to approve a sidewalk encroachment at 301 North Sterling Street with Keith Whitaker, doing business as 301 North LLC.
I have a motion to have a second.
Second.
Okay, discussion. Sally, the question I have, if you come up North Sterling Street, is that gonna, Chad, if you put the picture back up with the pillar, please. That won't be a visual impairment to anybody turning right or left. I mean, it looks like it's off the street far enough that it wouldn't
Yeah.
impair anybody's vision.
Yeah, should not be, and if you see how this is, so when you're coming up here, if you look at that red car, and you're coming up there, or also the back of the blue car
Right.
in the picture, you should be able to come up there and see. It should not block your view.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Exactly, how much encroachment is coming out there beyond what's already there? Do you know?
That's gonna be on the other.
I can't tell, Farsi, there's a drawing in our,
There we go.
but I can't tell.
I couldn't read the numbers in the drawing.
So the encroachment is a couple things. One is for the, to be able to put the pole. The red line that you see around, kind of the circular red line, that is for about, I think it's a 12 or 14-inch sitting wall. And then that provides that transition from the sidewalk to that patio area. And then the sidewalk, in order to get the handicap accessibility, so you have to meet certain slopes to meet ADA. So in order to do that, the sidewalk would be extended out into what you see as the existing street. I think it's around 3 or 4 feet in order to meet that
Which
that
is the
slope
yellow
transition.
part.
And
Which
the
is the
artist,
yellow hatched part.
the artist rendering doesn't show the sitting wall.
No, it does not.
So you
That
have
was,
to
that was,
imagine
that
So
was
your
drawn
sidewalk
prior
comes-
to that.
Yeah, this was drawn prior to that.
We'll still be able to get the bike through there. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Motion passes. Next on our agenda is the consideration of appointment to the Burke Development Board of Directors. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the reappointment of Councilman Chris Hawkins as the mayor's designee to the BDI Board of Directors for a term to expire December 2021.
I have a motion to have a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next is consideration of appointments to, yeah, congratulations, Chris, I think.
I was sitting a little too close. That's the reason I wanted that motion on the other end.
I understand. Next is an appointment to the Community House Board of Control. Sally, I think we have several.
We have several folks who have been serving that are agreeable to continue reappointments if you also desire.
I'll entertain a motion.
That's a mayor's appointment, isn't it?
I think this is a council
Council.
appointment, actually.
Yeah, this says it's council.
A motion to reappoint Wanda Burnett, Marshall Spees, Phil Scarborough, Kay Dignan, Ron George, and Colleen Bennett to the Community Building Board of Control for terms to expire on December 31st, 2020.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. The next is a mayoral appointment, how to pronounce Mr. Lee's name, Duhav Lee, for a term to expire on May 3rd, 2020. We do have one more agenda item. It's a pass-out, and it's consideration of an amendment to the audit contract. I'll call on Sally.
This is an extension to our audit contract required by the LGC. The ABC Board is a component unit of the city, and they are required to be presented, their numbers separate, but presented as a part of our annual audit. They do not have their audit completed yet. They had to get, for the first time ever, an actuarial study, and they were a little late in requesting that, and their auditors are not complete with that. We have seen some draft numbers. This is just to comply with the Local Government Commission's requirement for us to turn ours in past December 1st.
I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the amended audit contract to comply with LGC requirements.
Have a motion to have a second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Any further business to come before City Council? We're adjourned.